Kevin. I've never thought about it that way before. All right, we are ready to begin. Here we go. Welcome, everybody, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour, the best dang game dev podcast on the planet. Today, we're talking with GC Chu about entrepreneurship in gaming.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from real industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host, Willem Felpenthal, and joining me today is GC Chu. GC is a business development and operations consultant who's worked for a number of different companies, and we actually just confirmed him as a professor in our upcoming Level 3 program. GC, it was so lovely to meet you for the first time just the other day. I got a great sense of energy from you and a great sense of expertise. Welcome to the show. What are you having for lunch here today?
I'm having a cup of tea, but pleasure to be here. Looking forward to talking more about everything, and I love what you're doing. I never knew that you actually play the sound right after. I always thought it was an edit in.
Nope. Yeah, it is a this podcast is all about efficiency. So as much as possible, it's a live event. It takes us an hour. We record it. We put it online. That's it. Nobody does any editing. Yeah, exactly. Weakness is there too, because there's some awkward moments now and then. But oh well, it's fine. Well, welcome to the show, GC. I have seen you on LinkedIn a little bit, but I only got to actually meet you, at least virtually, for the first time a couple of days ago. But yeah, I got a great sense from you. I had a great chat. I left the conversation smiling, which is a great test of a person's character, I feel. I'd love to hear, as always, the first question of this podcast, which is, GC, tell us about your origin story. Where are you now in the game industry, and how did you get there?
Sure. So I'm originally from Singapore, and I started off my career in finance, actually. Just, that sort of standard investment banking, and subsequently going into private equity, where we looked at different investments and sort of projects and how private equity could actually invest in these projects and actually make them better. So during this process, it was a lot of outreach and understanding founders, understanding startups that were either in the industry itself or ancillary to the industry. And then basically within the private equity world, putting that money in to actually see how best we could actually bring this companies up. I was lucky enough to have my own startup, which I ran and then successfully exited. And then I subsequently came to the States to have my higher education. I went back home for a year after graduating from the US, and I decided, I think I would like to try out working in the States. So I came back over, and I had a couple of job interviews, and I had this investment banking offer, and I also had a Google Games offer, and I didn't get the Google Games offer. I remember feeling really crushed, like really, really crushed. And it didn't make sense, right? Because like you've always, it's normal to be like, oh, I'm down. I didn't get the job, but I felt really crushed. And I realized, like, oh wow, you know what? I really love games, and it's not a common thought. And in Singapore, the game industry is really, really small. And so I was in the States, where the games industry is massive, and I had the opportunity, and I just switched this massive career pivot from which was basically finance and business consulting straight into gaming itself. And that was very difficult, simply because the gaming industry tends to, you need all that back experience, and then you can't just slide in mid careers. It's kind of difficult to actually explain all the things you've done that relate to that role that you're going for, because it's the game industry in a sense is very isolated in terms of what it's doing, because it's so incredibly unique. But I knew this, and I loved it so much that I made this massive pivot. I was fortunate enough to join a studio that was in the process of forming, and that was where I really found my niche, where I realized all the knowledge that I had prior to um, uh, to joining games was part of uh, everything that was in the formation of a studio. And so I found that niche of being that sort of person who actually handles the business side of the games industry. Um, I I noticed that developers are great. They're really creative. They're really fantastic. They're great at developing games, but not so much at developing businesses.
Mm.
And I help that with the development of the business side of things.
Mhm.
I don't think people on the business side of the games industry gets a good rap, especially after the past year. But I also understand where they are, but I also don't, and it's this mixed feeling that I have, and simply because um, I have a belief that everybody needs to eat, and you have to make money from things.
Mhm.
But I also know that it's a hard industry, and creatives need to create. So you have to find that balance between being creative and also being financially savvy enough to actually be able to afford your bread and cheese in the morning, so to
Mhm.
speak.
Yeah, that is I love that. First of all, the first thing for me to call out here, I love that you are indie. That the way that you got started is you wound up joining a startup, and that you wound up working there at the grassroots and the ground up, because that is, at this point in time, not necessarily the best way to break into the game industry. It definitely is more reputable for you to join, of course, the biggest company possible. If you had landed that job at Google, great. That would have helped your game career a lot. But the reality is, like, there's so many people vying for those roles, and really for all of the roles. And so starting a company is within your control. And then
Mhm.
also, it is, I think, what we need. I have worked with, been ancillary to both the film and the music industry a decent amount. And both of those industries are even more of a struggle for the beginner than the game industry is. And I just desire and become more and more corporatized, become more and more fewer and fewer players that control more and more of the pie. And I want so desperately to avoid that for the game industry. So indie all day. Love that that's how you got started. I'm curious. The topic for today is entrepreneurship in gaming. I'd love to just get your version of the introduction to that. Where do you want to start talking about entrepreneurship in games?
I think the first place I really want to go into is the emotional portion about entrepreneurship that a lot of people neglect. I could go into the finances, I could go into the marketing and all that, but a lot of individuals don't realize the emotional strain that it has on, especially when you're a founder, let alone being on a startup team, because everything is new and everything's different. And also, I hope to give a little bit more information about a developer who's in, one of the big corporate game dev companies. I think I want to do something different,
Mhm.
and want to step out to also be more aware of the things that they should be aware about in their personal and professional lives as they go into, this new chapter or challenge.
Hmm. Okay, so then what are the things? Let's do entrepreneurship 101. By the way, I'm a founder. Yes. There are so many there are so many days where I just need like a hug or something. Uh, absolutely. So what is our 101? What are some of those skills that get skipped a lot? Because I 100% agree here. By the way, I'm gonna soapbox for 1 second. The term game developer, I think for a period of time, mostly just meant engineers or those who worked on the tech side of making games, or at least that's how we thought about that term. I definitively will tell you right now, for all future and past, game developers are anybody who worked on the development of a game, including business people. Business people are game devs. We are all game devs. If you contribute to a game, the development of a game, you're a game dev. In addition, I absolutely agree that junior game devs and junior founders often skip the business side because they just want to get to the fun stuff. They just want to make a game. But there's so much, your chances of success when skipping the business side are dramatically lower because you, one, are being less practical. For instance, you're probably not budgeting. You're not thinking about some of the wider picture stuff. You're not actually being realistic about how much money or time it's going to take to build a game. That what happens to everyone. All of you will have a rude awakening where you think you can do more than you actually can in a given period of time. And then secondarily, it just means that there's no actual market for your game. Discoverability is the biggest problem for indie game studios. And if you don't have somebody, probably a founder, thinking about that on a regular basis and pushing to have a market ready by the time you launch, then you're just not going to have a market. Nobody's going to buy the game. So I 100% agree. How can we help this audience not have that problem? What is the 101 to what they should be focusing on and learning?
I think the first thing that they really need to realize that you're gonna face the unexpected, and they're gonna be ridiculously surprising and tough, and you have to build your parachute on the way as you're falling down, basically. It's dramatically different as to how it would be in a corporate environment where you do this, you do this, and you do that, and that's it. Your job's done. As a founder, you need to have this wide breadth of skills. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but you need to have that wide breadth of skills such that when and the unexpected happens, you are able to adapt to it. And honestly, part of the games business is about marketing. It's about the business side and selling and making money, enough money to actually build the next game. I just saw a comment that flew out there. It's like, I'm at the point of founding a studio so I can create jobs, and I love that. It's needed and everything's needed. But the economist in me and the money person in me is like, how will you pay for this? How will you not only just pay for this, but get people to invest in you, in the company, in the belief that you can build the product that will make more money to pay for more people to actually build the next game? Because it's a lovely notion to want to build a company and to build a game that everybody will love, but the logistics of the matter is that everybody needs to eat, and how are you going to be able to provide for that? And that's really, really key.
Yeah, it is. As someone, I think game developers are artists, and artists tend to be anyway optimists. And the reality is, the likelihood of you landing, I think actually, if I'm remembering the stat right, the likelihood of your studio making a game that makes enough money to justify a second game is only about 7%, if I remember the numbers right.
Yeah.
And only about 30%, I think, of Steam games make over $10,000. In fact, it's even worse on mobile. Only about 20% of mobile games make back the $100 they spend to put their game on the platform. So yes, the expectation of just, I will release it and they will come is non-existent.
Yeah, and if it has happened or can happen, is it really going to happen to you? Are you that lucky in life that you've won a lottery multiple times, sort of thing?
Yeah.
It's a situation where when you are a founder, you kind of have to build everything in the best, stack the things in your odds as much as you can control. And that's why I say that you really have to be ready for to understand that you're going to get the unexpected. And I think this happens both at the professional level and the personal level when you're building that game studio. A lot of individuals look at it from a professional perspective of like, I can handle anything that is unexpected because I know how to build a game. However, when you're a founder, you're making all these really important decisions. You are also coming in from your personal life, and those things will affect you. I'll give you an example. This individual I met, lovely gentleman, wanted to build this new game that he felt was gonna change things in terms of how the RTS genre and all that. And he really wanted to go into it, and he had numbers and all that. And I was talking to him, and one of the key things I was asking was like, hey, tell me about your family, right? And tell me about your life. And he's like, I'm married, I have 5 kids. And the first thing I was like, oh my God, 5 kids. How are you gonna 5 kids in America? How are you gonna pay for anything? What's your budget gonna be like? What's your minimum amount of money? Right? And I felt fear for him. Not so much that he can't do it, but more like, how are you gonna do it? And this is where I'm saying, like, your personal life as a founder is gonna impact your professional life, because it's no longer just about creating a game. It's also about supporting your family, because everybody has to eat. I subsequently felt better after he said his 5 kids, but they're all like 18, 19,
Mhm.
21. I'm like, okay, good. You're not a 3-year-old that needs food and attention all the time. But my point still stands is that these things are going to be key, because your personal life, if it's affected, if you're worried about being able to afford things, you're worried about who's going to look after kids and etc., they will affect your founding of your company and the running of your company. And this is just the reality of things, that you need to think about that personal perspective as well as the professional perspective when you're thinking of building the company and the game.
Yeah. So maybe, are there a couple of questions? Like, what are the questions that one should ask before looking to found a company? What are the questions they can ask that'll help them be a little bit more likely to succeed?
I think the first one you really need to, and because we're focusing this on the individual and not just the company and founding, is that can you afford this, right? And how much can you truly afford? And these things actually bring out a whole bunch of different questions that you also kind of need to answer. Because can you afford this is not about like, I've saved up X amount of my salary so I can go without work, without pay for a certain amount of time. It's not just about that, because if things don't go according to plan, which they will never, you're gonna be in a situation where, yes, you have budgeted for a year in which this is the development of the project, but have you budgeted for, say, if it doesn't work out and you have to raise funding, you have to look for a job, can you afford your lifestyle, or are you willing to accept the lifestyle that you need to take, that's I would say degraded, for lack of a better word? There is always the perception that you are able to handle these hardships easily. I would say really, really pay attention to how you are living your lifestyle, and are you willing to give up on the luxuries that you have? If you want to, can do it. Like if you're in a corporate job right now, pay and all that, try going out with your what you perceive as luxuries, and see what it's like. Is it something that you're able to handle? Is it something that your family is able to handle? Because I could be able to live in a tiny apartment or share a room and etc. But if you have a family, there's going to be complaints from the family, because not everybody is willing to take that risk. I've had founders come to me and they say, hey, I need to up my salary. I'm like, okay, it's your company. You want to do it, go ahead. And I'm asking, but I politely ask why. And he's like, my wife needs this. And these are things that you need to pay attention to. You need to talk to your family members and get them on board. They will. Here's the thing, your family members love you. They love you and they want to support you. And that is great, and also very bad, because it gives you that confidence bias and takes you away from the reality of that is life. And so you have to pay attention to that. I would say, like, yes, you saved up enough money to go without pay for, say, a year. Think of that year as your development. Great. What about 6 months after that? Let's say your job, you need to find a job after that. You have to look for. It's not instantaneous, as we well know from the past year. It's not instantaneous to find a job, right? Budget for looking for that as well. Be ready for that unexpected by trying to imagine or even plan for these sort of situations so that you can be my first thing.
Yeah, it's really good advice. I have a direction for us to head that I'm curious your thoughts on. So I don't have any stats on this one. This is anecdotal, but I talked to enough founders that
I lost you. I can't.
Am I back now?
Yes.
All right, thank you, everyone. It's my freaking mic. It is very touchy. I happened to touch it wrong, and it stopped. All right, I have a direction for us to head. I'm curious your thoughts on a particular subject. It is GC's Chew now. You had the show for 5 seconds, GC. You didn't take it over. So I don't have any stats on this. It's completely anecdotal, but I've talked to enough founders that it feels like the vast majority of them are founding alongside working something else. They aren't saving up enough money to go and quit. They're just doing it in the margins. So instead of being full-time on their game company, they're giving 10, 20, 30 hours a week to it while they're working something else that sustains them. It's what I did for I kind of did a hybrid, I guess. I saved up enough money to get started, but then I gave myself a 6-month runway, didn't even come close to making enough money in 6 months to sustain myself. So I started doing side work. And that is largely how I still operate to this day. So I'm curious, how do you feel about that as an approach, about people working kind of whatever they can work to keep the money coming in while founding something versus saving up and going full time?
I think there are pluses and minuses to both. My personal preference as a founder is to keep your day job, keep going until your project or your prototype has such viability that people are willing to invest in you, so that you don't have the pressure of it doing prototypes and testing without a salary, because you get a lot more pressure. You basically cut down the risk of that. That being said, you get all the benefits of that. That being said, is some of the bigger investors, and I'm talking VCs and financial institutions, other financial institutions, they also like to see commitment. And that's the tricky thing, right? Do you have enough that you can showcase your commitment by quitting to search for, say, the remaining amount of money that you need, because they're willing to, say, put in 50% of the budget, but they want you to show your commitment. These are all things that you kind of have to weigh. My honest preference is, as long as you have your reserves that you're able to support yourself without pressure for more than a year, I think that's a good thing to go for. But it really boils down to how you're gonna handle it, really. So I will always lean towards working until you got a stable prototype to actually showcase, versus like, I need you to pay me money and invest in my company so that I can prototype. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah. I would, as somebody who talks to a lot of people and has done this myself, it also feels like really the vast majority of the time it's somewhere in the gray. You'll save up a certain amount. You'll work full time on your business a certain amount. You'll run out of money or have some kind of problem, get another job for a while you kind of keep it running, and you'll flow in and out between those two states simultaneously while looking for funding, building out prototypes, throwing out concepts, starting again. So it definitely there's no hard way to do it, and many different people have done it different ways, and there are those very rare unicorns that manage to just have it all happen for them overnight. But you just
rich parents.
Yeah, right. Yes. Not many of us are those unicorns, so most of us have to live in the gray. Awesome. Yeah.
I just saw a question is like freelancing, doing branding and pitch decks, and while building a studio. Freelancing is great because you get a lot of, but one of the problems with freelancing is that you actually also have to go searching for clients. Unless you have a stable repertoire of clients that keep coming back to you, which technically means you have a whole new business of your own, you would have to go out hunting for clients. So that means you're burning even more energy, because that becomes a third job, hunting for clients, doing the job for the clients, and then building your game. So you increase your workload. So this is, like I said, there are a lot of different ways that you could potentially fund your company, but you have to think about the drawbacks as well. And I think that a lot of people have to sort of do a real 360, and a real 360 involves, boiling down, okay, if I'm going to do this, what's it going to cost me? I'm going to have to build my company up for freelancing. I have to build out my clients, so I have a repertoire of clients that will provide me with income. I think one benefit of working corporate is that even though it's no guarantee these days, you do have a certain amount of stability that you don't have to search for client. You just have to do your job and go back and do what you really want, right?
Yeah, I have, there's a lot of benefit, of course, to working on your business full time. But somebody at some point said, I actually prefer to have my business plus a day job, because I feel like those two things reciprocate each other. The knowledge from the two supports each other. And I have found that to be true. Your energy levels and how much you can manage is another matter. But definitely, I think my preferred method is indeed having a stable job, not contracting work, not consulting work, although that I have totally done that too, and it can work. But as you said, it is a whole a massive area of work to find clients. While working something else that I can kind of learn from, gain money from, and build connections through, I build out the business. That's my preferred method, and I think is usually what I recommend to people, if you can sustain it. And then that also kind of lights a fire under you. I think I generally get more done for my business when I'm working for somebody else, because I am insistent on getting to the point where I don't need to work for someone else again.
I hate you so much that I'm going to work harder so that I don't have to work.
Yeah, and then when I go full time, because I've had periods of full time, like, I was among the many who got laid off a couple of years ago. I had a period of full time, and I honestly did less. Like, I think there was less of a fire, and also I guess I was just focused on trying to find a new role. But yeah,
I think it's also like what drives you, right? Like if hatred drives you, great. I mean, what pushes you forward? I think finding that sort of energy and the enthusiasm to actually power your battery to actually get through things. You find out more about yourself when you're doing something for yourself, and that sort of you realize like, oh, this is what drives me. This is why I want to do it.
Yeah.
When your business becomes your full-time thing, it also just change your perception of how you want to live your life at the same time. It's curious on how you to it.
Yeah.
I love the fact that like you hate the guy. So you want to
just the rage. Yeah, I think it's actually, this is the last point. We're going to do community questions here in just a moment, but it actually is, I love the concept of like knowing your sort of motivational complex. It's something that I say a lot, especially with my students, that game design especially is more or less the study of human motivation. When we build out a level, we are creating something that sometimes is literally on rails. There's only one way to go. But a lot of the time, it is soft on rails. It is me incentivizing the player to go the right way. And that is 100% just the study of motivation. Like, how do I get somebody interested in going this way? And that's true of all game design. How do I get somebody interested in playing my game at all? Why does somebody keep playing my game? And that whole area of study of human motivation applies to your life as well. What are those forces that drive you? What are those compulsions that keep you working and engaged? What is it about founding that even matters to you? And when you discover those things, tapping into them, keeping them alive, and using them as a source of energy and power is, I think, important. And yeah, for some people, and at different points in your life, it might be like rage. I will not work for somebody else. And for other people, it's joy and fun. Like, I just love working on my own games. And, there's 100 others besides that. But yeah, finding out what works for you and what compels you, and then hooking that into your life as much as possible, really powerful and important for a founder.
I think in the end, it's like, as long as you're able to create some semblance of stability for yourself to be able to create, you're not going to be able to create when you are, life is never going to be perfect. You're always going to have a little stresses. But you try to keep the stresses to the minimum so that you can create and do what you love. And having that sort of balance is tricky, because you don't know what you're willing to tolerate as well until you actually facing it, right?
Absolutely. All right, I think.
Question of the day.
Wow, it's time for the question of the day. I'm going to get the first question asker ready to go. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask the question of the day, where we reiterate one of the most important things we learned from GC. And the first person to type the correct answer in the chat gets some House Cup points. If you're listening, speak the answer out loud. My question for today is simple. What is the one question GC wants you to ask yourself before founding an indie game studio? And let's go see who our first question asker is. I think it's Seldatron. Seldatron, would you like to ask your very first question about boosting development and sales live, or do you want me to ask for you? And let's see. Can you afford this? Do a 360 of your life, not just finances. Lewis nails it. Yes, indeed. The one question GC wants you to ask yourself is, can you afford this? And how much can you truly afford? And that is more than just money. It is also your time, your energy, your family's energy, your family's well-being. It's not just actual dollary dues. All right. So Seldatron would like the first community question. Let me know, Lewis, which house you would like to give those points to. Well done. Seldatron would like to get their first question asked by me. So here's the question. How do you boost the development and sales of your game? Very broad question. Give us some of your top tips.
Marketing's really the only way. I mean, getting the word out there about your game such that people know about your game and are excited and happy enough to spread the news about it. Marketing. That's the only way, because you could build the best game ever, but if nobody notices it, right, or even tries it out, you're not gonna get. It's like Leonardo da Vinci. He painted the Sistine Chapel, but if nobody said look up, you're not gonna notice it right through the wall. So it's that sort of thing.
Yeah. Do you have any, so it's absolutely marketing. I refer to this all the time because it was a simple lesson that I think is important for people to hear. The Crowdfunding Nerds, which is another podcast, they also run a business called Next Level Web, where that's just a contracting business for you to go and get help with marketing. I worked with them. I like them if anybody wants to use them. But the podcast, at least, is something for you to go check out, the Crowdfunding Nerds. They have a very simple concept when they talk about indie game marketing, which is they encourage you to think about it like a bank, where the dollars that go into and out of your bank are your followers, your community. And so when you find somebody cool who's excited about your game, that's like you getting a paycheck. You make sure you put them in the bank. The bank is wherever you are tracking and uplifting your community. Generally, that's either Discord, an email list, or a social media channel. For game developers, Discord is super powerful. And so once they're in the bank, you got to make sure you appreciate interest. It's another one of their little metaphors, which just means keep them engaged, keep them excited, involve them in the creative process. And then by the time you're selling the game, they're ready, they're there. A stat that's really pertinent here, when you run a Kickstarter, for instance, about 70% of your backers will be people that you brought yourself. So the thing that I think a lot of people just expect to happen is like people will find your game. That's just not true. It is hardcore, like door-to-door community building from day one.
I think one thing that needs to happen as well is that you have to see every either dollar spent or everything that you do as a force multiplier. Sort of, it's 1 + 1 = 3 sort of situation, where you get more, even if it's marketing, even if it's research, anything that you put your energy into, you really need to have a true force multiplier for everything.
Awesome. All right. Second question of the day is from Joker of Aces. Joker would also like me to ask for them. Joker says, how do you pitch yourself to an indie team as a business professional or private accountant without prior on-team experience?
I think you begin by asking the indie team the questions that you know and that they probably would not know. If you can actually ask these questions and help them think about the problem in different ways, it actually showcases how you could potentially fit in. A lot of business and a lot of game dev is being the person to ask the sort of questions that nobody has asked before, and then finding the solutions for them. Being able to provide a solution for a problem that has not occurred yet is a massive win for a lot of individuals. And being that consultant, you're meant to be there to actually help. And so showing that sort of knowledge of the wide breadth of questions that they have not even thought about yet, that's key.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. I think this is a pretty classic question for all the disciplines. How do I find that first role when I don't have prior roles? I think there's a lot you can do there. I am always a fan of basically practice projects, game jams, and like volunteer projects. You can absolutely do business development on a game jam. You can practice, on a game jam. That's not really meant to make money. You can market a game jam. You can create a community surrounding a game jam or a practice project. You can get all of this experience on just a smaller game that nobody is going to say no to you for.
Yeah, absolutely on that. I think I never thought about it. It's true. Even if it's a game jam, if you want to build that sort of experience, it's great because what you're trying to do is really build your knowledge base as well. Even if because when you're helping all the game industry, when you're not even in the game industry yet, you're actually building that sort of knowledge base that will help you see and perceive things that hopefully in the future will help your clients, and it provides that sort of knowledge to collect to improve everything really that you're putting forth.
Yeah, and I think this is so I tend to be a kinesthetic learner. I tend to like to try things, and that's the best way for me to learn. That's not the way that everybody learns best. So however you do learn best, start with that for sure. Make sure you are doing your homework. And finding mentors is another one to throw out there. A lot easier to find mentors than you might expect. You can cold call a mentor pretty quickly. Look for people who are just a couple of years ahead of you rather than people who are like way off into their career. And just start by asking them a couple of questions and show that you're engaged, be grateful. And pretty quickly, you'll find people who will help steer you in the right direction for whatever your role is. All right, next question, another broad one from Zeldatron. Zelda's asking the big questions today. Zelda says, how do you find funding for a game studio? And second part, are there any ways to get funding without any drawbacks?
Okay, so it's firstly like, what do you mean by drawback, right? Rich parents is not a drawback, but then if you have to do what they want you to do, that's also a drawback, right?
Sure,
so it really depends what is your drawback. So I can't determine for you what your drawback is and what your standard for that is. Anything that makes you unhappy, I guess. But when it comes to funding, typically there are two ways. It's basically from publishers or investors. You can self-fund and all that, but very rarely do you have enough funding to actually make it to the end of the game. And if you do, it's time, money sort of thing. But publishers tend to be very focused on the game itself, and they invest in that particular game that you're developing. And investors tend to invest in the studio and invest in you such that they can maximize their returns in the future as well. Investors also do invest in game, and that's how you want to negotiate it. But the key thing here is that you have to look at what is your game, what is your business, and how do the publishers, are they looking for that sort of game, or are they looking for that sort of business as well?
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, drawback is sort of a nebulous term. There are two sides of every publishing, of every funding option for sure. I think, if you have rich parents, that's nice. Hopefully they aren't terrible parents. I've met a lot of rich kids who hate their parents. But I am personally a big fan. This is not for everyone for sure, but I'm personally a big fan of crowdfunding. I think largely because it keeps the power in your hands as much as possible. And I'm just all for indie. But the drawback of crowdfunding is that it tends to be much smaller amounts, and therefore and you got to build an audience.
Work really hard to actually get that community that would be willing to crowdfund you. The success rates of crowdfunding, it's really small. And one of the key things about crowdfunding that people don't realize is that you have to have achieved a significant portion of your budget prior to the raise. So if you're raising $100,000, you have to have raised at least $70,000 prior to putting out the crowdfunding, because you're trying to raise that additional $30,000. It's the way the algorithm works with all these things as well. Is certainly you have your Kickstarter out, you dump in your $70,000 from all these various individuals, and then you rise to the top, visible for everybody to see, and you hopefully get your remaining 30. And also doing all the things that you promised to do with crowdfunding, like gifts or etc., can also be another job in it of itself.
Mhm.
So pay attention to that. I guys, we get into in the game business because we love games, we love creating, and we love to create joy and all that. But we also need to acknowledge that the game business is game. It's life in very different ways that it will test you in different ways. If you want to make your own game, it's important to think about all the things that you will be either sacrificing or willing to sacrifice when you go into it.
Yeah, it is not for the faint of heart. It is not something. I think a certain amount of excitement and optimism is important. I personally believe in a healthy dose of optimism, but I think you do also need that optimism needs to be tempered with reality. Hopeless optimism will only shoot you in the foot for the most part. A little bit of optimism with a little bit of reality, though, I think is good. So you should be like, it could be me, I could be the unicorn. But you should also immediately after saying that say, it probably won't be, and I'm going to assume it isn't. But having a little bit of that hope is good, as long as it's tempered.
I will buy that lottery ticket, but I'm not going to quit my job yet.
Right. Yeah, love it. All right. Next question is from Misha. Misha asks, what is your perspective on finding game-related AI marketing tools and onboarding AI experts into your indie team?
AI marketing tools are still very new. I've seen companies where they like, we will help you create your next ad. We'll help create the banners and all that. The thing is, how is this AI going to make your product special? How are you going to stand out from the crowd? The AI in the end still follows an algorithm. In fact, normal human beings, when they do marketing, they also follow the algorithm, which we learn from someone else, etc., etc. You're the only one that's going to be able to discover what is it that makes it special and actually take the step to make things different. I would say AI has to be your force multiplier, but you shouldn't rely on it completely. This goes not only for advertising, but also for the business side of things, making the game, etc. I forgot the second bit of the question.
Would you recommend having some sort of AI expert on an indie team?
I mean, for the game to be successful, it's not necessary to have an AI expert. It depends on how you're going to be using the AI expert. I mean, the AI for the game itself, and it's super focused on having the AI be representative as part of the gameplay. Sure, but like I said, it boils down to that force multiplier effect as well.
Yeah, I'm AI is still, I think AI marketing especially, we don't need more content. Your company doesn't need more content. It needs content, yes, but it doesn't just need more content for the sake of having more content. More content doesn't actually get clicks. Good content gets clicks. Interesting content gets clicks. Creative content gets clicks. And AI doesn't make those things for the most part. AI makes pretty cookie cutter content.
Yeah, I was working with a organization that was trying to do the AI component of game marketing. You get your cookie cutter. I mean, you really do. And that gives you the baseline, and that helps. Maybe you're posting once a week sort of thing. But what is the different thing that's going to keep you, make you show the difference and your unique selling point of game and your studio or even yourself? That's going to come from you, and that's going to come from serving and identifying it within yourself and putting it people as well.
Yeah, go check out some of there's a couple of really wonderful examples out there. One of my favorites to direct people to is Aggro Crab, who are the creators of Another Crab's Treasure. Go check out some of the indies that have managed to make a powerful campaign for themselves and look at what they did. AI tools aren't bad. My personal stance on it and the Indie Game Academy stance on it is they're here, they're coming, important for you to learn how to use them appropriately. Resisting them will mostly only mean you're falling behind in your skill set. we of course need to use them ethically and insist on the data that's being mined to be mined ethically. But yeah, AI tools are good. But I think the way that I have used them myself best and seen them used the best is something like an assistant. They're like a little AI partner who kind of helps you do the things you were already going to do, as opposed to something that you can just like set and forget. I think that side of AI that people who are thinking that that's a use case of AI, it may be. But yeah, at least in the marketing world, I don't see AI generated content really getting you any kind of significant traffic. All right.
The thing I like to use AI or is basically getting comparative of the games that I'm building. If a game has all these Steam reviews, you're not going to read everything. Do a pull of all the data from the reviews, and then you ask the AI to help you analyze it. What are the keywords that keep coming up? What is it that you keep talking about? So you don't have to spend hours and hours reading through everything. And there's a tendency when we are reading reviews and finding out information to have a sort of confirmation bias that anything that agrees with you register it first before anything else. Having that sort of tool that's diagnostically analyzing it passionately, AI helps with that as well.
Yeah, 100% agree. And like a brainstorming tool as a designer, it's really nice to be able to be like, what is the Bose hardness of these 10 different gemstones? And it just gives it to me. That's great. All right, we've got one more question, I think, and then we will wrap up for the day. Fishy Floor says, my last company really leaned into the CEO and team's experience together to gain credibility for funding. As someone with a lot of experience as a marketer, event planner, and game community builder, how do I frame my ability to create a good studio? Will it really lean on a good demo for me to raise money?
Because your background is in the non-technical development side of business, where it's more about advertising and all that, yes, you're going to have to showcase a demo to that you are able to build the game. Because if you're building a game studio, it's all about the game, not just about marketing the game. That demo would demonstrate, firstly, that you can build the game, and also can demonstrate that how you are able to project manage that game to its creation. Even though you don't have the corporate experience of building a game, your project management experience, as well as your development experience, working with all the different team members to build this demo, demonstrated clearly in the demo itself. And that helps take away the perception that you are just a marketer. That showcases that your abilities that help you gain that trust from the investor or the publisher that they were willing to put that money in with you.
Yeah, you pretty much if you're asking this, or if anyone is listening to this hoping that they can nail funding without a demo, for the most part, unless you really are already a big name, that's not going to be true. You will almost certainly need a demo, proof of concept, vertical slice before you actually get funding. And that's a good thing. You want to spend the time to make sure that your concept is actually viable, interesting, plays well before you go looking for funding, because you yourself are investing. You're making responsibilities and promises when you look for funding. So definitely do a demo first. The other part of it, though, you mentioned like pitching yourself, kind of. How do I become a part of the viability? That I think is a little bit more art than science. And I would just ask yourself, like, what is it that's special about you? Hard numbers and metrics are always good. Games that have succeeded that you worked on, of course, good. But also there's other parts to your story that will tug heartstrings, will matter to people. One of our Foundry teams is working on a realistic simulation of diving. It's a realistic diving game. And one of the team members has been working on simulations for the government for like 4 years and has a whole story about that. And then their narrative designer is a touring dungeon master. He like travels the world and does DM work. Neither of those things relate to a diving game. Hell yeah, that's a great story. Hell yeah, that was a part of why we chose them to be a part of the Foundry program. So it doesn't have to be the hard, like, oh man, I contributed to this cool AAA game. That helps, definitely. But you can come up with something that makes you special as well.
Showcasing that you can do what you're saying that you can do is through that demo.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. All right, we are at the end of the episode, before we say goodbye, there's two things that we like to do, GC. The first one is to assign some homework. So what is something that the audience can do in the next week that'll take them about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today?
I think the first thing to do is figure out your personal budget. That's my homework for you, for folks, to actually look into how much you're actually spending and what are you willing to go without for luxuries if you want to go building your business. That will help you with your 360 on yourself, because you're constantly building up models and financial analysts for your business. But what about you? Think about yourself and how you configure into it.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a good piece of homework. No matter what you do with your life, good for you to budget. Maybe we like to encourage people to post their homework. So maybe post for us the final number that you would need to survive every month running an indie studio, if you're comfortable doing so. Obviously, you don't need to show us too much, but maybe a little bit of transparency on that would be good, because if somebody thinks you're being unrealistic, they might say so, and then you'll learn.
I think one of the things is also, sorry to add on this, what you feel you're wasting money on. That like, oh my God, I spent so much on Starbucks. I mean, I thought it was just $5. I'm not trying to be a boomer sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, I'm
that dang avocado toast.
It's not the avocado toast sort of thing, but when you are like, remember what I said about force multiplier? If that Starbucks drink helps you work better and is a force multiplier for you because you're in that environment that helps you, great. But also think about it, right? You do have to actively think about it, because your resources will be so much more limited.
I love that. Honestly, that's a good homework. All right, so do a little bit of budgeting, do a little bit of numbers, and then post to LinkedIn for us on what you are wasting your money on. What are some of the surprising things that you learned about your budget? And then you can tag us. You can tag GC Chu, you can tag me, Willem Delventhal, and you can tag the Enigma Academy. We'll tell you you're cool and respond to you a little bit. If you're feeling uncomfortable about putting it on LinkedIn, you can also always put it here in our Discord. All right, the last thing to do, GC, before we say goodbye, is are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to give, or anything you'd like to plug here at the end of the episode? Oh, terrible timing. We've just lost GC. I will talk for like 30 seconds to see if we can get GC back in here. Pretty amazing. Oh, he's here. Okay, great. I'm gonna not talk then. Impeccable timing. Hey, are you there, GC? I don't think we can currently hear you.
Sorry about that. It's a technical issue. It just popped off all of a sudden.
No worries. So all I was asking, this is the very final bit. Are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to give to the audience, or anything you'd like to plug here at the end of the episode? Oh, no. All right, well, are you there?
Sorry about that. It's
no problem.
Cut out. I'm just going to leave the video.
Yeah, that's fine. It's the very end anyway. So one last time, third time's the charm. Are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to give the audience here at the end of the episode, or anything you'd like to plug?
Do the difficult thing first. That especially when you're doing your studio, you want to go straight into your game dev, but do the difficult thing first, which generally is the thing that you have been avoiding and is super necessary. And I'm guessing finance is one.
Do the difficult thing first. I love that. That's a nice, simple message. Look up GC Chu. There'll be links to his LinkedIn, as well as any other pertinent links down below, as always. And yeah, this has been a phenomenal episode. GC, thank you for giving us your time.
No problems, man.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Heck yeah. Thank you for those who listened, and thank you for those who asked questions. If you enjoyed this episode, as always, we ask that you send it along to just one other person who might enjoy it too, who could use GC's words of wisdom. And then finally, we'll be back here again every single Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern time in the Discord. There are links to join the Discord down below if you aren't already in here. And we'll be talking about cool stuff. Once again, thank you, everybody, for a phenomenal episode. And never give up, never surrender is my last words of wisdom. All right. There it is.
Game over.
All right, bye, everybody. Took me a second to get it going. Adios. And goodbye to the stream. We'll see you again soon.